I swore I'd never come back to Cold Hollow. But every promise you make to yourself in your 20s cracks like pond ice when you hit your 30s, and the debts catch up. When my uncle died last winter, a man I barely remembered outside a few cigarette-yellowed Polaroids and a single story my mother used to hiss when she was drunk. His last scrap of land fell to me like a bad tooth dropping into my palm. I thought I could handle a week. Sign the papers, sell the acreage to the bank, walk away with enough to keep the wolves quiet another season. The map made it look harmless, a square of farmland pinned between County Road 19 and the riverbed. 50 acres of rotting soy rows and a barn that hadn't seen a fresh coat since my father was a boy. But no map ever shows you the weeds pushing up through the floorboards, or the footprints half swallowed by the rows that shouldn't be there, or the man who never left. I got to the house just after dusk. The sky was a soft bruise behind the naked trees, that bitter February chill humming under my jacket collar. The drive up the rutted path shook my truck so hard, I thought the muffler might rattle right off into the weeds. The house waited at the end of that track like a thing pretending to sleep. 2 stories slumped in on themselves, shingles curling at the edges like old bark. The porch light flickered once when my headlights hit it, then died. I stepped out into the hush of Cold Hollow, boots crunching gravel that hadn't been turned in years. I could smell the rot from the fields, the sweet, sharp stink of last year's harvest, left to blacken under frost. Inside, the air was dense. It clung to my throat like wet wool. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips that brushed my shoulder as I passed through the hall. Dust coated the furniture in a film so thick it blurred the edges of things. It made it hard to know where the old man ended and the house began. I didn't unpack, just dropped my bag on the kitchen table, where mouse droppings dotted the corners like Morse code. I tried to sleep, but the wind turned the walls into a mouth. It hissed through cracks, rattled window panes loose in their frames, made the floorboards exhale under my boots when I paced from the sink to the door and back again. Somewhere near midnight, I cracked the back door to smoke. My breath drifted out in ragged puffs that didn't last long before the cold snatched them away. That's when I saw the light in the barn. Not much, just a dull flicker, like a candle pressed against the ribs of that sagging carcass. It stuttered through the gaps in the planks like a heartbeat behind bone. I told myself it was a trick. The wind, the moon, the way the mind stitches patterns out of the dark. But I dropped the butt into the snow and felt the sweat on my neck cool to ice all the same. I found him the next day. The sun barely cut through the cloud cover, that flat gray sky that makes everything feel closer than it is. I had a clipboard, a cheap disposable camera to snap proof for the bank, my boots sinking into the half-frozen mud between rows. He was standing between the stalks. No tractor, no sign of work. Just a man, tall, scarecrow thin under a tattered canvas coat, a brimmed hat so sweat-stained it looked fossilized into the shape of his skull. His hands hung at his sides, fingers dark with dirt or something thicker. I lifted my hand, half wave, half shield against the glare. He didn't move. I called out, voice catching in my throat, when it bounced back too clear across that field that shouldn't have echoed at all. "Hey, you the caretaker." No answer, just a slight tilt of his head, like an old dog weighing whether you were worth the effort of the bite. I turned, left my clipboard in the snow, walked back faster than I meant to. His shadow stayed between the rows. watching. That night I heard him, not with my ears or with the floor. Footsteps on the porch boards, slow, weighty enough that the nails groaned in the joists. The door handle gave a soft metallic rattle, the sound of someone testing how much fight was left in the old lock. I pressed my palm flat against the wood, felt the cold on the other side bleed into my skin like an infection. I could taste it in the back of my throat, iron and old dirt. When the footsteps shuffled away, I didn't breathe until the wind came back. Morning brought no answers. I tried the local sheriff's office, 2 rooms in a cinder block building behind the feed store. The deputy behind the glass didn't bother hiding his smirk when I explained. "Must be Thomas," he said, voice flat as tire iron on gravel. I asked if he could send someone out. He just shook his head, eyes drifting to the clock above my shoulder like there was somewhere better to be than here. "You'll be fine. He don't much like strangers, but he's harmless." I wanted to press him. Thomas who? How long? But his smile turned to a hard thing, teeth like fence wire. "Best stay inside at night," he said. The storm came that evening, sleet hammering the windows like a fistful of nails. The wind pushed through the gaps in the siding and made the walls hum like an old chest freezer choking on itself. I found myself standing at the kitchen sink again, the tap dripping onto a pile of rust that had once been a drain. Every so often I'd flick the porch light on. Every time the yard was empty. I fell asleep at the table, chin on my forearms, the storm rattling the old bones of the house until they answered back. I woke to silence, the storm gone, the house colder than before, that deep marrow cold that settles in abandoned places. My breath fogged the glass of the back door as I pressed my forehead to it. Outside, fresh snow, untouched, except for the trail. Boot prints, wide and deliberate, leading from the porch down the slope to the barn. No wind had drifted them over. They looked pressed there minutes ago. The barn door yawned open, a wound in the night. I told myself I'd lock it, nail it shut, call the bank, walk away. But my boots were already on, the flashlight heavy in my palm, the beam thin and weak as a dying nerve. Inside, the barn smelled like old hay, wet timber, and something sour that stuck to my nostrils. The beam of my light skated over rusted farm equipment, a tractor half sunk into the earth where the floor had given up decades ago. In the far corner, a shape, him, crouched low, his hat tipped back to show hair slicked to his scalp in thin, greasy whirls. His breath rasped, a wet shudder echoing against the rafters. His eyes caught my light, 2 glassy pits, deeper than they had any right to be. "You came to dig?" he rasped, his voice a handful of gravel thrown against the barn walls. I wanted to run. My feet stuck to the hay-slick boards like they'd been nailed there. He rose, all joints and angles, shoulders broad as fence posts. "You want your share," he hissed. The grin split his beard, teeth brown and broken, tongue sliding over the gaps like a worm. Something flashed, steel catching my beam. A pitchfork, handle slick with something darker than oil. When he lunged, the world narrowed to splinters and breath. I stumbled back, boots skidding over the dirt, ribs catching the tractor's rusted blade hard enough that my vision stuttered. He swung again, the tines thunking into the timber inches from my knee. His breath washed over me, sweet rot, old milk turned to curd. He laughed, the sound too soft for the size of his chest. "Your uncle promised," he rasped. "Promised I'd keep what's mine." His fingers locked in my collar. I smelled the river in him, black water, silt, a memory of drowning. The pitchfork tip scraped my cheek, a line of fire under my eye. I felt my pulse in my teeth. My shoulder inched back, hand fumbling for something, anything, to swing. My knuckles found the rusted wrench half buried in the hay. The arc was blind, a crack, a grunt, the pitchfork clattering off into the dark. I didn't see him fall, didn't feel my boots slam into his ribs once, twice, until the rasp of his breath turned to a wheeze. The barn door yawned wider when I hit it at a run, the snow catching my boots, the cold burning my lungs raw as I sprinted blind back up the path. Behind me, the barn swallowed his curses, wet, soft, promising. I didn't stay to see if he'd follow. I didn't pack. I didn't shut the door behind me. When my truck skidded down the drive, the rear tires spitting gravel and sleet, I didn't look in the rear view, but I see him every night since. In dreams where the snow never drifts over the footprints. In the rusted flicker of headlights on wet timber. In the hush of the wind pushing through my city windows, whispering my name in a voice that always smells like river mud and rotted hay. I was 34 the winter I came back to Brookhaven. I never planned to. There's something about a place like that, a town small enough that your name echoes louder than your words, that clings to your clothes like the stench of a dead animal you can't wash out. I left when I was 17 with everything I owned in a green duffel bag and $57 from my grandmother's purse. I swore I'd never see the frost on these rooftops again. But life has a way of dragging you backwards, by the wrists when you're weakest. And when my father died, the man who hadn't spoken my name out loud since I was 15, I found myself on a Greyhound bus at dawn, watching a streak of bruised sunrise smear itself across the cracked window. The bus dropped me at the town square, still the same. 2 brick shops with papered-over windows, a gas station where the pumps were older than I was, and the skeletal ruin of the old theater, its neon sign broken, half the letters dangling like loose teeth. The wind there always smells like rust and spoiled milk in winter. The air tastes metallic, like chewing on a battery. No one was waiting for me, so I walked the 3 blocks to my father's house. The boards on the porch steps sagged under my boots. The house leaned a little more than I remembered, like a drunk hunched against a wall to steady himself. The windows watched me, thin glass eyes behind peeling shutters, and for a moment I thought about turning around, going back to the bus stop, letting the whole thing rot behind me. But I didn't. I pushed open the door and stepped back into the cold heart of Brookhaven. The wake was in the church basement that same night. I wore my father's old suit, sleeves too short now, the lining rough against my wrists. The lights down there flickered in their yellow sockets, buzzing like hornets behind frosted covers. Folding chairs in crooked rows, a table sagging under a dozen casseroles no one would eat. They came, the people who never left. Faces from my childhood that blurred at the edges when I tried to put names to them. They touched my shoulder. They asked the same questions they didn't want answered. How's the city? Will you keep the house? Will you stay a while? I smiled. I lied. I told them I'd be gone by Monday. That's when I saw him. At the far side of the room, half in the glow of a naked bulb, Joel Harker. Back then, Joel had been my best friend. The summer I turned 12, we'd swum naked in the quarry, traded ghost stories in my backyard, smoked stolen cigarettes behind the high school gym. He taught me how to punch a kid in the throat so they'd drop faster than a gut-shot deer. But Joel had stayed, married at 19 to a girl who never smiled at him, worked at the mill until the mill died, then found work where work was the same thing as looking busy. And now he was here, heavier than I remembered, belly pressing at the buttons of a flannel shirt, beard patchy and red like rust. His eyes met mine and didn't blink. He didn't come over. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. And then he turned and left before I could open my mouth. I didn't sleep that night. The house breathed around me, the old radiator clanking, the walls settling with a sound like bones shifting under skin. I lay on my father's mattress, the shape of his body still pressed into the foam, and counted the seconds between the groans of the pipes. Somewhere past midnight, I heard the porch boards creak. Heavy steps, a pause at the door, a click, too soft for a key, too sharp for settling wood. I held my breath until my lungs felt like wet cloth. When I looked out the window, the street was empty, but the snow under the porch steps was broken by footprints, wide, heavy, boots I knew. The next day, I found Joel in the diner. He sat in the back booth, the same booth where we'd once planned to run away together, age 15, both of us half drunk on stolen gin and ideas bigger than our bodies. I slid into the opposite seat. The vinyl stuck to my coat sleeve. The waitress brought me coffee that smelled like scorched earth. Joel didn't look up at first. When he did, his eyes were too wide, the pupils tiny pinholes in seas of blue. He was sweating, though the diner was cold enough to make my fingers ache when I touched the mug. "You shouldn't have come back here." His voice was the same, deep, soft around the edges. It made my stomach knot. I forced a laugh. It sounded like breaking glass. "It's my father's funeral, Joel." He didn't blink. "He didn't want you here. Nobody wants you here." The words didn't land until he stood up. When he leaned over the table, his breath hit my face, sour and warm and too close. He smelled like wet dog and cheap whiskey. His mouth twitched. "You remember the quarry?" he said. "You remember what we put there?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my tongue was thick, my teeth locked together. He grinned, wide enough to show the missing tooth in the back. His fingers drummed on the table, a slow, deliberate rhythm that made the hair on my neck stand up. Then he walked out, the little brass bell on the door jingling behind him, like the giggle of a dead thing. I sat there a long time, the coffee going cold in my hands. When I finally left, I saw him across the street, standing under the black skeleton of the old theater's sign, watching me. No coat, no gloves, just that grin. That night, the house creaked louder. Wind pressed at the windows, whistling through a cracked pane in the back room. The front door rattled once, like someone testing it. Then, silence. A silence so deep it made my ears ring. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the knob of my father's study, the smell of old papers and mildew leaking through the door like a memory I hadn't asked for. In the kitchen, the back porch light flickered on, office on again. Through the thin curtain, I saw the shape of him, Joel, standing at the edge of the porch. He had something in his hand, a shovel. The metal blade caught the light as he dragged it slowly across the boards, back and forth, a dry scrape like teeth on stone. When I flicked the light switch, he didn't flinch. He just lifted the shovel, tapped it once on the step, and turned back into the dark. I should have left then. I should have packed the bag and walked into the cold until I found the highway. Instead, just before dawn, I found myself at the quarry. The trees around it were skeletal in the winter dark, branches clawing at the starless sky. The water was black as oil, iced over in places but broken in others, jagged plates drifting like teeth. I stood at the edge where Joel and I used to strip down and dive when the air was so hot you could taste it in the back of your throat. I remembered how we'd buried something there once, a box maybe, or a bag. I didn't remember what was in it, but Joel did. His boots cracked ice behind me. When I turned, he was 10 feet away, the shovel across his shoulders like a farmer going to work. His breath steamed in the dark. His eyes glowed mean under the brim of a filthy baseball cap. "You brought it back with you," he said. He stepped closer. The snow squealed under his heel. "You never should have come back here." The wind snapped across the quarry, sending a flurry of powder over my boots. Joel swung the shovel once, lazy, like testing its weight. "Where is it?" he hissed. I couldn't answer. The taste of iron and old fear coated my tongue. He lunged. The shovel blade missed my head by inches, sparking against the frozen stone. I ran, feet slipping on the icy rim, breath burning my throat raw. Behind me, Joel's boots drummed a steady beat on the stone, the same rhythm he'd tapped on the diner table. I don't know how far I ran. I don't remember the branches tearing at my face or the brambles that opened my palms like paper. I remember the taste of blood and bark. I remember the sound of Joel's voice behind me, low and sing-song. "You can't bury it again." I didn't stop until the town lights bled through the trees like a wound. When I turned to listen, the woods were silent. Joel was gone, but the town was still there. And somewhere in the dark behind those pines, a shovel waited to carve my name into the cold ground where we'd buried something that never stayed buried. I left Brookhaven at dawn, my father's house sagging behind me like a broken ribcage. I don't sleep well now. Every winter I smell frost and metal, even in my apartment in the city. Some nights the radiator clanks just like the old house, pipes settling like footsteps in the attic. And when the wind rattles the window glass, I swear I hear him. Shovel on the porch step, a voice through the crack in the door. "You shouldn't have come back here." I didn't plan on stepping foot in Hollows Creek again. For 16 years, I told myself that town was just a rotten tooth. Something better left buried in the gums than dug up and made to ache all over again. But there's a gravity to a place like Hollows Creek. It drags you back, fingernails hooked under your ribs, tugging at something soft you thought you'd let scab over. My father dying was the final yank of the hook. No funeral home would take him. Too much trouble, they said, though no one would say why. So they boxed him up quick and cold and left his house to me like a bad inheritance that stank of oil rags, old coffee grounds, and rusted memories. I told myself it would be 2 nights, 3 at most. Pack up the loose ends, sell the carcass, salt the ground if I had to. But I should have known, Hollow's Creek doesn't let you close the door once you open it. The house greeted me like a cough in a closed room. The floorboards had a voice of their own, creaking slow under my boots, announcing every step like I'd never left. The air tasted stale, sour, mouse droppings in the walls, mold in the crawl space. Somewhere in the dark, a pipe dripped. I unpacked nothing but my father's old shotgun. I propped it beside the bedroom door, the same door I'd slammed so many times when I was 16, and certain I'd never need to see his face again. Sleep didn't come the first night. It hovered, sticky and sour, just out of reach. The radiator clicked in its sleep like old teeth, grinding in a jaw. Every time my eyes slipped shut, I heard the soft rasp of branches tapping the window screen, begging to be let in. I woke before dawn, not from sleep, but from exhaustion of pretending to chase it. I stood at the front window with a mug of instant coffee gone cold, watching the frost eat away at the grass in the yard my father never mowed. Past the fence, Hollow's Creek stretched its crooked spine through the trees. A handful of broken shingles, flickering porch lights that hadn't been replaced since the Reagan years. Beyond that, the dark ribbon of the highway, promising escape I couldn't seem to take. A cruiser idled by, slow, headlights off, but the hiss of the tires on gravel loud enough to scratch at the inside of my skull. The shape behind the wheel didn't wave, didn't nod, just passed, a shark's fin through dead water. Sheriff Klein, or his dog Deputy Trammell. Hard to tell in the half-light, but either way, they knew. Hollow's Creek had a way of knowing you before you knew yourself. I told myself I'd walk to town, breathe air that wasn't recycled through walls that smelled like stale grief. The wind on the road tasted like cold pennies, like the metallic tang of a cut you can't find. By the time I reached Main Street, my boots were rimmed with road salt, and my throat ached for something warm. I ducked into Dot's diner, the same cracked counter, the same flickering sign that buzzed like a trapped fly above the door. Dot didn't ask. She never did. She poured my coffee like she was topping off an old wound that wouldn't clot. "You're him, aren't you?" she said, voice soft as the steam rising off the mug. "The boy come home." I tried to smile. My face cracked around it. I nodded once. "You'll want to keep quiet," she whispered, pouring herself a cup that she never drank. "It's good to keep quiet here." Halfway through my coffee, the bell above the door coughed out a chime that made my skin crawl. I didn't have to turn to feel the cold slither in behind me. Sheriff Klein's boots struck the linoleum, slow, deliberate. Hollow's Creek's heartbeat. Deputy Trammell was a shadow at his shoulder, all jitter and grin, a thin snake coiled tight in a uniform too clean for how dirty it felt to look at him. Klein didn't sit. He hovered behind me, close enough that I could smell the stale tobacco on his breath, the chemical tang of old leather warmed by the heater. "Back to settle things?" he asked, like it wasn't a question, like it was a verdict already read. I nodded into my coffee. Words caught in my throat like dry leaves. "Best be quick about it," he said. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, just a tick that felt like the lifting of a mask. Some things don't like being disturbed. That night, the house refused to breathe. Every window groaned under the cold. The shadows bent the wrong way when I passed. I found myself standing in the hallway, listening for footsteps that belonged to no one living. At 2:17 a.m., the knock came. Not sharp, not demanding, gentle, polite, like a debt collector tapping at your coffin lid. I pulled back the curtain. Deputy Trammell's grin sliced through the porch light, too wide for his face, eyes glittering dark as wet gravel. I didn't open the door. He didn't need me to. "You got business in the woods?" he asked through the glass, his voice fogging it with each word. "You and your daddy left things out there that don't rest easy." My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. He pressed 2 fingers to the glass, traced a circle. A shape I recognized, the old quarry's mark, burned into my memory like a brand that never faded. "Don't go digging," he said. His grin snapped shut. He stepped off the porch without waiting for an answer. Sleep didn't come. The walls leaned closer. The radiator's hiss turned to a whisper I couldn't quite catch. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. The soft weight of dirt pressing on my chest, sifting through my hair, packing itself between my teeth until I woke gagging on phantom soil. By dawn, I was back at the pantry. I found the old tin box my father hid beneath false boards, behind jars of preserves that had rotted to syrup and mold. The box fought me, the lock rust-welded shut, the hinges resisting every pry of my screwdriver. When it gave way, it exhaled a stench of old paper and older sins. Inside, newspaper clippings yellowed to the color of nicotine stains. Photos half-burned at the edges, men kneeling in the dirt, badges gleaming under a flashbulb that revealed more shadow than light. And a map. Always the map. My father's handwriting carved across the paper like a threat. "They know where you sleep." The woods behind the quarry hadn't changed. Same broken fence post I'd vaulted when I was 15. Same soft belly of earth that shivered underfoot, like it was waiting for me. I dug with my bare hands first, the frost burning my knuckles numb until they cracked and bled. When the shovel blade clanged against metal, I nearly laughed. A sound so alien it made the pines lean closer to listen. A box, small, steel, sealed tight with tape turned brittle by time. Inside, a badge, tarnished and cracked. My father's, or the one before him. The name scratched out so deep it tore through the tin. And beneath it, the thing that should never have been buried. A tooth, too long, human, root jagged like it fought being pulled. Behind me, the woods breathed. I turned slow, dirt caked under my nails, frost stinging the cuts in my palms. Sheriff Klein stood there, Trammell at his side, shovel in hand, his grin gone now, replaced by something worse, something slack and hungry. "You went digging," Klein rasped. He stepped closer, boots muffled by dead leaves. "You found what your daddy thought he could hide." He didn't bother raising his gun. He just nodded at Trammell, who stepped forward, shovel scraping frost, his breath puffing out in slow clouds that hung in the cold like ghosts. "You shouldn't have come back," Klein whispered. The shovel swung. The last thing I heard was the siren, so far off it sounded like a lullaby. I dream of dirt now, cold soil packed against my lips, trickling down my throat in slow drips like bad communion. Above me I hear boots pacing on frozen earth, voices through the soil, wet whispers, soft as worms turning in old wood. The badge sits on my chest, heavy as a headstone, and Hollows Creek hums under the sirens, waiting for the next knock. I never meant to stop in Ashvale. The plan was the same as it always is when you're running low on money and worse on time. get off the interstate, fill the tank at the cheapest place, grab burnt coffee from the first counter you see, and keep going before the road talks you into staying longer than you should. But the rain that night wasn't rain. It was a curtain, a gray wall that swallowed the highway in slow, lapping gulps until my wipers gave up smearing it and just started squealing against the glass. The sign came out of that blur like a relic dug out of a bad dream. Ashevale Inn, vacancy, coffee 24/7. The neon flickered behind the wall of rain like a wounded animal's eye. I pulled in because the alternative was drifting sideways off blacktop and into a tree that no one would find until spring thaw. The inn looked older than the road that led me to it. 2 stories of rain-rotted siding, half the letters on the front sign burnt out so it read more like Ash Al-I-N. The office door had a cracked bell taped to the top. When I pushed it open, the bell made a single dry clink, like something too tired to protest anymore. Inside, the lobby smelled of warm dust and old coffee left too long on a burner. That stale, scorched bitterness that sinks into the wallpaper until even the air tastes brown. He stood behind the counter. The innkeeper, a man who looked like someone's grandfather in the middle of forgetting your name. Thinning white hair combed so carefully you could see the pink scalp beneath. A black cardigan that swallowed narrow shoulders. Hands folded on the countertop so tightly, the knuckles bloomed yellow like old bone. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, eyes wet and small behind thick glasses that caught the overhead light and fractured it into pinpoints I couldn't see through. I cleared my throat. My voice sounded too big in that close, stale room. Got a room? His smile unfolded like paper that had been soaked, dried, and folded again. All creases and dampness. "Oh yes," he said. His voice was softer than I expected. Sweet almost, like he was telling a bedtime story to someone who'd stopped listening. "Room 6, he said. "Perfect for you." He slid the brass key across the counter. No credit card swipe, no name, just the key, cool and weighty in my palm. The hallway to room 6 was too warm. The carpet clung to my boots, sticky in a way that made me picture old spills and worse secrets soaked deep into the padding. Every door I passed was closed. The brass numbers nailed into the wood at angles that suggested they'd been reattached by someone with trembling hands, and too many apologies. My key fit the lock on room 6 with a soft click that felt final in my gut. Inside, a bed that looked slept in before I got there, a nightstand with a chipped lamp that hummed when I turned it on. Wallpaper that might have been green once but now sat dull and slick where the seams had peeled apart. A mirror hung on the opposite wall, crooked. My reflection inside it was thinner than I expected, my eyes brackish with road fatigue, and that pinprick of something else I didn't want to name yet. The rain outside pressed at the window like a fist made of water. I watched it until my eyes unfocused and the glass turned black again. Sleep came in pieces, a shallow drift on the edge of waking, the kind that lets the room breathe around you. The hum of the lamp, the tick of the baseboard heater like old teeth clicking together in a restless jaw. I woke once to a soft scratch, the sound of something gentle but persistent at the door. I lay still, throat dry, the taste of stale coffee and metal at the back of my tongue. Another scratch, then the faintest thump, like fingertips drumming on hollow wood. I slipped out of bed, feet cold against the thin carpet, and peered through the peephole. Nothing but hallway, washed in that old yellow bulb light that makes shadows stick around the edges like mildew. The next morning, the innkeeper waited behind the counter. Same cardigan, same folded hands. "You slept well?" he asked, though the way his eyes flicked to my throat, then back up, made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't name. "Fine," I said. "Lieutenant." "Breakfast?" he offered, gesturing to a percolator behind him, the pot sweating coffee darker than motor oil. I wanted to leave. I wanted to peel rubber out of that lot and let the map spin me anywhere but here. But the rain was still there, thick enough to drown out the world in white hiss against the windows. So I took the cup. He asked about my family, where they were buried, whether they'd ever tried to come back. I laughed, a single sharp exhale that bounced off the stale air and came back to me unchanged. His smile didn't shift, just the fingers on the counter, tapping, slow, methodical, like counting something only he could see. "Some folks," he said, voice low now, "carry things inside them they don't understand, pieces that aren't theirs." I told myself to nod, to be polite, to drain the coffee and leave. But my hands shook. My mouth stayed dry. That night, room 6 was colder. The bed felt damp. The pillow gave off a smell under the detergent, faint, coppery, like the metal tang when you press your tongue to a battery. I didn't sleep. Not really. Somewhere after midnight, I heard the key turn. Not my key, his. The door opened with a sigh, not a creak, soft enough to slip through sleep if you weren't perched right on the edge of waking. The lamp hummed. The mirror caught him first. He stood in the doorway, the innkeeper, his glasses gone, eyes naked and round and wet, the whites shot through with a lattice of red veins like roots crawling through snow. He held something in his left hand, a length of rope coiled like a question. His right hand stayed behind his back. He stepped forward, one slow step, then another. I tasted iron again, thick and sudden, dripping down the back of my throat like syrup that wouldn't be swallowed. He smiled, or what passed for it. "It's in you," he whispered. "I can hear it scratching." He dropped the rope. The other hand came forward, a knife, not kitchen steel, not hunting. Something older, the blade dark, the edge jagged, carved symbols running down the spine like an infection that had learned to write. He moved closer. His breath hit my face, sweet rot. Old prayers turned sour in a mouth that hadn't known water in too long. I kicked once. The lamp went over, glass bursting against the wall. Sparks fizzed, then darkness. The carpet burned under my palms as I scrambled back. He lunged, knife flashing dull as a dead tooth. His knee hit my ribs, weight pressing me into the mattress so hard I felt the coils bite bone. He whispered in a language that smelled like damp earth and gray flowers. Words that made the dark pulse behind my eyes. I clawed at his wrist. Fingernails sank into skin that tore too easily. Dry paper over brittle wood. His hiss cut through the chanting, a sound like a rat drowning under floorboards. I don't remember standing, just the feel of the doorknob, slick with something warm. The hallway tipping sideways under my boots. The sound of him, the scrape of old slippers on carpet as he came after me, chanting now, louder, faster, his voice cracking like dry timber in a fire. I stumbled through the lobby. The rain had stopped, the neon outside flickering weak as a dying heart. The bell above the door screamed when I threw it open. I didn't look back until the lot swallowed me, the gravel spitting under my tires as the sign's letters stuttered in my mirror. Ash Al-I-N. It's been 3 weeks since room 6. I sleep with the lights on. When I wake, there are scratches under my nails I don't remember making. In the mirror behind my eyes. Sometimes I think I see something shifting. Something that didn't leave with him. Something that's still in there, scratching